Los Angeles police officer, he wrote an open letter to LeBron James. He invited the NBA superstar to talk about policing and race. First told you about him last week. It was in response to LeBron's now deleted tweet that identified the officer involved in the fatal shooting of 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant during an altercation with another girl. LeBron's tweet included the words "you're next" and the hashtag accountability. It came after Derek Chauvin was convicted of killing George Floyd. So let's take a look at this. In a Facebook post, LAPD officer Deon Joseph wrote in part to LeBron, "Your current stance on policing is so off base and extreme. Your tweet that targeted a police officer in Ohio who saved a young woman's life was irresponsible and disturbing. It showed a complete lack of understanding of the challenge of our job in the heat of a moment." Officer Joseph joins us this morning to talk about it, and I want to thank you for starting your day with us right here on BNC. You penned a letter. What compelled you to write directly to LeBron James?
Well, first of all, I was a fan of his, so you can understand how completely disheartened I was to see that that officer who was involved in that shooting had to do something that no officer wants to do in the heat of a moment. And I know it's even harder on him, the fact that he discovering that it was a child that he shot. And it just took me back to a time when I was a few years ago where I almost had to shoot a 19-year-old young man who took some tape and shaped it in the shape of a gun and was running through the streets in the dark chasing African Americans through Skid Row where I work. And they were terrified, and everybody was screaming that he had a gun, he's going to kill me. And as he put this thing up to a 70-year-old man's head in a dark street, I almost had to use deadly force to stop this man. By the grace of God, this young man broke right, went to a street light and started howling, and he was taken into custody. But if I would have shot that man, I was thinking he could have said that about me. And then everything I've tried to do to help people, housing homeless people, empowering women who are experiencing homelessness, talking about sexual violence, domestic violence, all that would have been thrown away because somebody with power and influence and 50 million followers would have turned a lot of people against me. Now, I don't believe that he meant violence or when he said he's next. I don't believe that at all. But you got to understand, there was a police officer in another part of the country who was involved in a justified shooting. And once again, the rhetoric was that he was a murderer, and some kids showed up at his house and started shooting at him. So we have to be careful what we say, and we also have to develop an understanding of the reality of our job. It's not easy.
Yeah, LeBron went on, he deleted the post. He put up another tweet later. It says, "I'm so damn tired of seeing black people killed by police. I took the tweet down because it's being used to create more hate. This isn't about one officer. It's about the entire system, and they always use our words to create more racism. I'm so desperate for more accountability." Now, LeBron is saying you're using his words to keep us divided. What's your response to that?
I don't think he was talking about me. But I think his
Well,
words
he's talking about in
itself,
general, everybody that was criticizing him.
in general, right?
Yep.
I believe the words in itself was the embodiment of hatred. You know, a lot of if you don't like something or somebody you've been, guided to hate, you're going to say things that are going to hurt. And once again, that was the embodiment of hatred. I'm trying to flip this thing around to where we can have a conversation about understanding. I don't want this to be used for hate. And what I hate is that people are going after this man. And even prior to this, just calling him all kind of names. Look, I was LeBron when I was a young man. I was a young African-American male. Before I was a police officer, I experienced racial profiling on 2 occasions as a civilian and even 3 times as a police officer. So I had negative views about police. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, a very dangerous and turbulent time for black men where a lot of young black men were dying just for the color of their shoes. And the police had to respond and deal with that. I watched the Rodney King incident, and that angry to this day, you can't tell me that what happened to that man was justified. That was an act of evil. So those things, plus the things I listened to or exposed myself to, the music I listened to, yes, F the Police was one of my favorite songs. These things guided me to the thought that police were inherently evil until I became one. The only difference between LeBron and I is that I saw the other side. I'm no different than my beautiful black people out there. I just saw the other side, and it's not what people are saying. Not to say that racism doesn't exist in police department. That's not true. It doesn't mean that brutality doesn't exist. I've had to report 2 officers for misconduct, and I was glad to do it. But in 25 years, only 2, that's pretty good.
Right. And look, I respect, what you're saying, and I understand where you're coming from, because sometimes we have to be accountable for our tweets and have to be careful because they can be taken out of context. But you mentioned a lot of things that you've gone through as a black man, not only as a police officer, but we are in very turbulent times, and a lot of people are very emotional. So is there a part of you, as being a black man, taking off the uniform for a second, that understands the emotions that LeBron was going through at that particular time? Even though, yes, you're right, we also have to be careful about how our words are used and may be construed.
Absolutely. Just because I put on a uniform doesn't mean I forgot what it is to be African American, or that I've lost any sensitivity to the pain we feel when we see an injustice. When I saw what happened to Walter Scott, it angered me. When I saw what happened to Laquan McDonald, that was clearly a murder. Oscar Grant, that officer had no business having his gun out in that situation, and why it was out is beyond me. To me, that was a murder. Eric Gardner. But because I'm an objective person, and also due to my training and experience, there are other controversial incidents that I look at and go, based on the totality of circumstances, hey, I understand why this happened as well, because I've been in similar situations. So, no, I haven't lost sight of the realities that there are negative exceptions to law enforcement that we all have to work to get, root out, and we are trying. But sometimes we only find out about them when they rear their ugly heads. You know how I find out about most police misconduct across the country is turning on the news, just like you. So that's just the reality of it. That's not what I see on a daily in my walks as a police officer.
So, Officer Joseph, there's a couple of things that you said that I think we have to unpack, because we've talked to former police officers, black officers, sergeants, who tell us they don't just see it on the evening news. They are next to it. They've been next to these so-called bad apples their entire career, and that it is systemic. How would you explain the disproportionate treatment of black and brown people by police in America?
It's really hard to explain. It's one of the things people say is, one of the people that come up to me and ask me, it says, Deon, why are only white cops getting into shooting with black people? And sometimes it's because white guys mostly work in police departments. If you go to Nigeria, in the Nigerian police department, they're mostly African black. So those officers are getting into something, they're going to be mostly of that continent, mostly of that culture. I've worked next to bad apples. I told you, I reported 2 of them. There are individuals who I believe were bad apples in my heart, but they never presented that stuff never presented itself or came to fruition in my presence. There was a couple of guys I worked with who I had a feeling there was something wrong with them, that they may have been racist, but they didn't do it when they was with me. They were with me. I ended up finding out when they got arrested or indicted.
You saw no inherent racism during your career in policing? None?
It's really hard to explain. It's like I've been working 25 years. I've never seen one officer to say, and I've been in a locker room with these guys. I've been in the weight rooms, and every officer's experience is different. I've never heard one officer say the N-word not in my presence. I've never heard that. I've never heard an officer say, let's go see how many unarmed black people we can go hurt today. I'm telling the truth. And here's the thing about me. I know I can be one of the most popular police officers in the world right now. If I just throw 800,000 men and women under the bus, I know I can. It's easy for me to do. I can exploit that and blow up big time. But if I say that based on what I've personally seen in 25 years, I couldn't sleep at night because I'd be lying. If I told you what you wanted to hear, but I know if I just tell you just what I've seen, I'm just telling you, I'm not saying that doesn't exist. I'm just telling you what I've seen. I know there's going to be a lot of people who are going to think that, oh, I'm just some brainwashed Sambo. I get it. I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I've just never seen officers say the N-word in my presence. I've never seen them say, I want to go shoot an unarmed black man. I've never witnessed that.
All right. Well, you say you're doing your part. We hope that you are, and we appreciate you for doing that. Officer Deon Joseph of the LAPD, thank you for starting your day with us this morning. And thank you for hanging out with us here on BNC.